Good morning. Let's get started. Today, we're going to kind of resume our part two from our part one. In this case, we're going to talk a little bit more about Hudson River and our services, and then we're going to get into an Acumatica demonstration. So I'm going to actually stop my video so you don't see my face the whole time, but let's go through this presentation. So we'll start here and go through the agenda. Basically, we're going to talk a little bit about Hudson River Computing again to kind of describe who we are. We're just going to do a brief overview since we did more detail previously. Same thing with Acumatica, just a quick overview of who Acumatica is. And then we're going to get into a product demonstration. So we'll start there. And so Hudson River Computing has been here since 1993, helping organizations implement accounting and ERP systems. We've also done some other pieces like manufacturing, CRM, et cetera, as we go down through. We're committed to the products that we pick. It's important to which products we do pick, since that, a high quality product with a number of installations, as well as the quality, et cetera, that we're going to look at, it's kind of important. So one of the nice things about Hudson River Computing is we're large enough to be able to do most projects pretty easily, but we're also small enough where you can, kind of reach the core people that you need to reach. Okay, you're dealing with the experienced people. So some of the core services that we actually offer are kind of, right here. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about each one of these. So in system design and implementation, our job is really to write solution for the business, meaning that we want to make sure that the solution that we provide to you is going to work well. Okay, if there are any known issues that we take a situation, we try to figure out the best way to work around it, and or sometimes we might end up getting into some of those services where we might have to customize or add a third-party product or tailor it. With the newer systems, some of these things don't happen nearly as frequently as it used to, say 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So one of the things that we do, and it's kind of important, is that initial evaluation of your organization. Okay, meaning that what do we need to do for you? What does the system need to do to make your processes work well? And then basically enhance your organization to get the information that it needs, where it needs it, when it needs it. Okay, so in the part of the system design implementation, we review all of that. And then, the other part is there are times where, you have a really complex project, there might be a complete analysis that's required, okay? Or maybe a detailed section where we really have to go into depth of how you want something to work. Okay, so we kind of really define all that upfront before we start the project. Sounds like a minor detail, but really important. Most of this we actually try to accomplish during the sales process as much as possible, because just like you don't like surprises, we don't like surprises in implementation. So one of the best ways to do that is to make sure we cover as much as we can during the process while you're choosing products. So our next service that we kind of talk about quite a bit is system integration and connectivity. Accounting doesn't tend to operate in a vacuum. Okay, and there can be different types of integration. For example, with Acumatica, we have what they call bank feeds, which allows us to read information that comes from the bank for bank reconciliations, or credit cards for expense management within Acumatica, those types of things. Okay. Additionally, there could be integration to a homegrown system. Sometimes organizations have systems that they've been using for years. They want to integrate particular information from customers or vendors, or perhaps even just GL. So it allows us to work with you to get that integration properly done, to integrate to and from Acumatica as necessary. The importance of that integration is, it comes down to, accuracy, reliability, ease of use, making it simpler for people to use the system as a whole, as well as the other system. Okay, nobody likes rekeying data. That's kind of the idea behind it. Customization and programming. We basically represent Acumatica and Microsoft Dynamics GP. We're focusing today on Acumatica, but the idea of it is, we don't like to do customization any more than you like to have customization done. So part of that key is making sure we minimize that as much as possible and use the system out of the box as much as possible. The idea of it is that we have, most of that managed by the vendor that's providing the software. That being said, with Acumatica, there's much more functionality available today than there used to be, say, 10, 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago. So if you take a look at Acumatica, a lot of times we don't need nearly as much, customization thought process as you did before. Now, that doesn't mean we don't tailor the system. So it could be a scenario where, hey, you know what, the sales order would work really well if we added one field to track one piece of information. We can do that very easily within Acumatica. We can also adjust the workflow. It could be a scenario where certain things get, changed around or moved around. Those are more tailoring instances than they are true customization and programming. So, kind of keeping that in perspective, we try to really minimize outright customization and programming. We really kind of look at it as more of a tailoring of the system to your requirements. A lot of times it's just setup and how things are set up. Data conversion. We all have data that we've used in our existing systems, or a lot of us do. And many times we want that to be brought forward. So we do a lot of data conversion services to bring that information in from your existing system and into your current system, into Acumatica, for example. And those sound like minor details until you want to do like comparative financials to last year's financial statements and things like that. That way you have things kind of to do that. So it really helps during a transition to have that data conversion process for future use. Training. Okay, one of the keys part here is, hey, a system can be great, but if you don't know how to use it, it doesn't take you very far, right? And what happens is with ERP systems is that just like, we all forget like how, we take, like, for example, Microsoft Excel for granted. We think everybody knows how to use Excel. And to some degree, everybody kind of does, but we'll put quotes on that. If you think way back, some of us way back, to the first time you used Excel and you wanted to say, you know what, I want to put it in these numbers in a row and I want to total them. Okay. Now, pretty much all of us know how to do that pretty easily at this point, but the first day we did it, it wasn't that straightforward. Okay, just like a lot of things, we've gotten used to them. One of the things with Acumatica that we do like is actually a pretty easy system to use, but the idea of it is there can be quite a bit of depth to it depending what your requirements are. So depending upon the setup, maybe certain things need to be set up for this, and this to work properly. And if that's the case, okay, so that functionality does what you want it to do, the way you want it to do it. Sometimes, the training can help, okay? And it can also help ensure that you're getting the proper productivity out of the software. There's times where we've had conversations to say, even though you go through requirements analysis at some point, they say, oh yeah, we don't do that. And then you start talking more about it and they use different terminology for that, whatever that particular topic is, and the product does it for them, but they never anticipated that the product would be able to do that. So those are the kind of things we kind of get into with the training, as well as the actual training. How do you enter a voucher, or how do you enter a general ledger entry, or how do you set up a bill of materials, depending upon your particular instance of the application. If we go a little bit further, one of the important things is we don't disappear once you're implemented. We have post-implementation services. That kind of actually comes in a couple different places. One is, hey, we did this 100 times, but somehow we did something wrong and we need to make a correction. How do we make the correction? Well, sometimes the corrections are really easy. Sometimes people try to make a correction and they do it incorrectly, so then it becomes an undoing things and whatever. So basically, we're here to help with all those kind of things that might happen beyond that. Additionally, there's times where you say, you know what, hey, some new features came out in Acumatica. We actually just had a release for Acumatica 2022 R2 in the past couple of weeks. So the idea of it is sometimes it's like, hey, we want to make use of that additional functionality that we haven't seen before. And if that's the case, then it comes down to a scenario where that would be great to be able to do that. So with that, our post-implementation services sometimes are for smaller things. It's not like a whole project. We say, you know what, we want to implement, bills of material manufacturing now. Well, yeah, that becomes a project. Okay, but you know what? Hey, there's this new AR feature that allows us to look up data a little bit differently. We want to implement that. And at those smaller things, we actually help with that kind of an ad hoc basis, much like you would with typical support. The other part of that is we're available. You're not just popping an email. You can send us an email, obviously. You can put it into our website. There's different ways to contact us. You can phone call, give us a phone call. But the idea of it is, it's not like if you're contacting Microsoft and it just kind of goes into Never Land. Okay, so the idea of it is, some of these larger organizations, one of the issues is it's hard to get the support back. All right, so to keep in mind though, additionally, if you need support, and that might happen sometimes when we're not available for some reason, Acumatica is a second tier. So basically, if you call with them, they will be able to support you as well. Now, that being said, keep in mind, they will not necessarily know your implementation like we do to be able to help as well. Okay, so hopefully you kind of understand what that kind of makes sense to. So anyway, so that's the theory on that. Okay, so it gives you kind of an idea, thought process, etc. So those are our core services. We're going to move it forward a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about Acumatica, okay, which is why we're here today. All right, so in this case here, you'll see again, just reminding everybody, you know, Acumatica has offices around the world. They have a lot of implementations around the world. Not all of them are under the Acumatica name. So for example, it might be under MYOB or Visma, for example, you know, so keep in mind that there's actually quite a few installations out there that people don't recognize as Acumatica implementations, okay? But they are based upon Acumatica. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind. So it's very powerful. You know, they have sales and supports offices, sales and support offices around the world, which is kind of important. You know, depending on your, you know, there's a lot of global organizations using Acumatica where, you know, they basically need that 24/7. You know, that all helps with all those pieces. Okay. So again, one of the things I think is kind of important, ranked highest in usability. Sounds like a minor detail unless you're the user. Okay, it's important to have ease of use and consistency of use. You know, once you learn something in the interface, does it work the same throughout the product? In the case of Acumatica, the answer is yes. You're going to see a little bit more of that in a few minutes. Okay, we go to customer satisfaction survey. Okay, if you take a look here, they are always toward the begin, you know, toward the top of that. That sounds like a minor detail, but you know, the bottom line is if customers are satisfied, that's a good indication that their services are good, the product is good, etc., and the ease of use is there. So those are all kind of technical factors and use factors that come into play with that customer satisfaction, as well as how does the partner and how does the company treat them. And those all come into play into that customer satisfaction measurement. So keep in mind, you know, Acumatica tends to be toward the top of that. And, you know, it's always, you know, it kind of shifts around a little bit from year to year, but I haven't seen them not within the top couple over the years. And that's actually pretty amazing, to be honest, to be that consistent over time. Okay. They've won awards over time. Kind of important. You know, we're picking products, you know, that are going to be here in the future. We're picking products for a variety of reasons, some of them technical, some of them functional, some of them what the organizations to work with, how they are to work with, etc. So that's why we have, you know, kind of these pieces here. And again, you know, over the years, I've seen them win the Cody Award over and over and over again. It's not a one-time, one-year thing. Ever since we became a partner in 2015 with Acumatica, that we have seen them kind of win these awards kind of over and over. So, you know, kind of keep in mind that those kind of things become important with that consistency part of that. The differentiators, you know, the technology leadership, that's really kind of important. And the way they built the product, we can keep up with the technology and update the technology as necessary. They keep adding to their business functionality and adjusting it as necessary and updating it as necessary and adding to it as necessary. It's really kind of phenomenal how much work they do put into the functionality part of the product as well. And then what does the company like to work with? The ethical part of the company. Okay, and those are all kind of important pieces. We're going to touch on these really quick, and then we're going to get to the demo, I promise. So one of the things as a reminder here is that with the future proofing of the platform, okay, meaning you can keep up with the technology, everything's kind of designed modularly. So it's easy for them to take a block out and put a block in. And so, for example, I use HTML5 because that one was one of the most amazing parts to me. When they released for HTML5, they had to replace that block of technology. Okay, and what ended up happening was they literally did that in one version, and they didn't have to recode the whole product. They didn't have to, you know, update the connections to, you know, how it worked within the system. They didn't have to reprogram all the functionality. They didn't have to adjust those pieces of how the interface worked or how it connected to us. They replaced the block and it worked. Okay, now I'm not saying there wasn't work for them to do that, but again, it was much less work than a lot of times I've seen in products where they don't have that modularity piece to them. And what ends up happening is they end up coding it all over again. And that's true for all these pieces. So for example, here with the database pieces, they recently released for AWS Aurora. All right. Now, normally what ends up happening is if you host with Acumatica, it's done on AWS and it's using SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server behind the scenes. So what ends up happening is with the SQL Server piece of it, if you want to put it on AWS Aurora, okay, they actually just have the different hooks in them. They don't have to recode the whole piece of it. They literally take that block out and put the block in. Now, in this case here, that's a checkbox for the block. It's not like you have to actually do any installation differences. It's literally very simple to make those kind of changes, but it's something you have to kind of be aware of. So slight differences that you have to choose if you decide to go there, but it's not hard. If you're using Acumatica, they are not using the AWS Aurora as their hosting environment. Okay, but they are hosted in AWS for the reliability and all. And again, that's true of all these blocks, whether it's a functional block, whether it's a platform block, okay, where they add some code pieces or ways to work with the code differently, or reporting and analytics, they literally in and out with the block. And then, even for the third-party products, it's very similarly, okay, the way the blocks work. So keep in mind that from an end user standpoint, all these things basically make it function to the screen, but from an end user standpoint, you'll never notice whether it's third-party product, whether it's the technology changed underneath. The answer is you come in the morning and they've done the update if when you requested it, and what ends up happening is it works like it did the data before with the changes we kind of all expect. So that's kind of the difference from an end user standpoint. Again, you can access this from basically anywhere you have internet access. So if you notice, you have your desktop/laptops, you have your cell phones, your watches. Not that I see there's a huge use for that, but you might want a piece of information that pops to you or something like that, and then even Alexa. So the idea of it is there's a lot of use scenarios here that you may not be accustomed to in your current legacy system. And doing with these is the other part. Okay. And again, we have a variety of embedded integrations out of the box. Okay. So, if you use DocuSign, for example, you can interface that in. It'll track the, signature and all that and bring it back in. So you have that information back and forth, along with various ship engines like Ship Engine, FedEx, UPS, Easy Post, Stamps.com, all those kind of things are there. And that sounds like a minor detail. If you're dealing with a lot of sales taxes, basically have Vertex and Avalara. To be honest, we haven't done Vertex, but we've done Avalara. Avalara is literally a few setup items, and you can literally do your sales taxes through all 50 states. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so as we go through this, I'm just going to make that do not disturb shortly. So if you step back and you look at that, that's kind of amazing actually. In the old days, and that wasn't that far ago, if you actually needed to do all tax in 50 states, there might have been services to help with your product. But what ended up happening was you ended up with a scenario where there's still quite a bit of configuration or import export to get the tax tables in and things like that. So that part all gets kind of eliminated. And sounds like a minor detail, but it's really kind of important. Okay. Office 365, we can easily export to, Excel and things like that, and you're going to see some of that. We'll go through that, but you get kind of the rough idea there. Modern security is important, okay? And it seems like pretty much every edition that comes out, each version that gets updated, they have some additions and to make the product even more secure than it was before. A couple of things of note. They do have things in the system so that, and they haven't had any ransomware attacks that originated through Acumatica, which sounds important, and it is, because we've actually had clients on the Dynamics GP part where their network got attacked, and of course this is a premise-based product versus a cloud product, and they ended up going down for their production because they were not able to keep their servers running. Because of the ransomware. In this case here, we actually had a case where one of the organizations we use with Acumatica had a ransomware attack. Their networks are all down and took them a couple weeks to restore. However, what they ended up doing is using, different devices that were not on the network at the time that it occurred, like different laptops, bought a couple different laptops, and Acumatica kept their production running because Acumatica didn't have any issues. So kind of keep that in mind. It sounds like a minor detail, but if you have to shut down your facility because, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to produce or what I'm supposed to ship or what I'm supposed to do next as far as getting payments out the door and things like that, very big difference, huge difference. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. The security parts of it are important. And, Acumatica has machine learning, where they basically are, the product is learning certain areas for you all the time. For example, if you use AP document import, it allows you to take a PDF and it will take and learn over time to do it better, to actually bring that into the system as an actual like P document. Those types of things. Same thing with expense items and things like that. The help system tries to learn to get better at helping you. And then, last but not least, the intelligent advisor. There's different ways of looking at that. There's different ways for dashboards to work and things like that that actually really do help. Okay. Just a quick overview. We cover a wide variety of industries. All right. So you notice here we have the general business edition, construction, distribution, manufacturing, retail commerce edition. A couple things I do want to add. This is their slide, by the way. This is Acumatica's slide. They do have some fleet management capabilities. They do have some like route accounting, those types of things as well as field service. And they're all directly from Acumatica. Part of the reason they don't put that as a separate edition, they feel like field service might work with construction, distribution, and manufacturing. Okay, and it does. It integrates with all three of them as well. Integrates with the whole system actually. So the idea of it is, if you need field service, regardless of the edition you want to run as a core, it still works with you. Okay, and it's kind of important. Okay, a lot of capabilities for analytics, in reporting. Again, these are meant to be end user type tools. Okay, and if you notice, there's a whole series of third parties. You actually, some of these here, these are third parties here. This is actually just Acumatica. So it depends upon what your requirements are, but it becomes very powerful as you go through. Just a couple quick notes. Compliance, it's SOC type 1 and 2. It has PCI compliance level 1. Those can be important if you're dealing with, especially if you're a public company, the SOC can be extremely important, but it's important anyway. And then the PCI compliance, if you do any kind of credit cards or those types of things, is really important. And in this case here, by the way, Acumatica never ever actually stores the credit card number itself. It just stores the token. Okay. And they also, by the way, they do go through these audits. So it's a scenario where, as they go through them, it's either once or twice a year, depending upon the audit. And, you can get notification for that if your audit firm requires that. Their Bill of Rights, a couple key points I just want to point out. There's sustainable pricing, meaning that you're not going to have any huge increases at any point in time. This 3% rule has been there. It doesn't mean they always have a 3% increase each year, but it comes down to they have never increased more than 3%. Doesn't sound like a big deal, except for this year when everything's going up like 8% or 8.5%. Makes a big difference in the sense that, hey, even if their costs have gone up, they're not going to be increasing our pricing, customers' pricing more than 3%. Okay, I think the other one that's really important is the ownership control. Okay, it's your data. And that sounds like a minor detail, but different cloud products work different ways with this. And most of them, if you decide, hey, we want to change products, if you want to continue to use the product with your data in it, the issue becomes a scenario where you basically have to continue to pay them for it. Otherwise, the option is, hey, you can get your information by electronically, and what they do is they give you like a series of spreadsheets or text files and things like that. Very hard to actually use after the fact. With Acumatica, the one thing that's different with that is they really do look at it as your data. So if you determine, say, hey, for some reason we have to change, okay, maybe your company gets bought up and hey, they're going to force you to go to SAP because you're going to be part of a much larger organization. But you know what? You want to keep access to that history and things like that as necessary. But it's nice to have the interface. With Acumatica, you could still do the cloud thing like, we talked about just now. But the other thing, what a lot of companies do is, hey, you know what? After the first 6 months, we don't really, we're not going to use that information a lot, although we might need it. So the idea of it is you can actually take and do a local installation of it, okay, on a server. this running SQL or something similar, it doesn't matter which database, and we can actually pull your data down, load it into that local machine, and you can run it in trial mode. And in the trial mode, you'd be able to actually access the system pretty much like you have been before, but there's a couple limitations. For example, you can't do a whole bunch of new transactions because there's going to be transactional limits. You also cannot, have more than a couple people in it at a time. But if you're looking at it for history after after 6 months or a year, you might not need any more than that. So the answer is you actually can see your data in the system like you did before, except for, it's actually your data. Okay, so it kind of makes sense. So talked about data ownership, and now we're to the product demo. So we're going to actually just minimize this. We're going to close the piece here, and we're going to go and show you what the product looks like. So I'm going to put this over here. Hopefully you guys can all see my window okay. So this is what Acumatica looks like. And I'm logged in as an admin, so keep in mind I'm seeing virtually everything. So you may not see everything. So the security works such that if I don't have access to something that's either on the menu or a window that I need, or not a window that I need, or a window that I've been blocked from, or hey, I don't have access to sales quotes, for example, whatever happens to be, it will show or not show based upon my security setup and what roles I belong to. Right, so it's relatively straightforward. So I'm going to go across the menu on the upper left. If I click on the upper left, that's basically the continual home page. Basically, it'll bring me back to where I log in at. And this is where I log into in this particular case as my admin. I have search, which is global. So if I do a vendor, for example, and start searching for it, or I just start typing vendor, what ends up happening is I'll see anything in the system that contains the word vendor. If you take a look, you'll see here, these are all the menu items that have vendor in them. If I look at transactions and profiles, I don't see anything there. It means there's nothing that has the word vendor in it, like a vendor name or whatever. You have help topics. Again, you're going to see all the ones that contain the word vendor. And again, I can do the same thing for files that are attached throughout the system. So if I'm looking for a purchase order, et cetera, it doesn't really matter. I can actually pull it up. All right, so if I look for bartending, okay, and I do another search, what you'll find is, in this case here, this is for customers. If I take a look here, menu items is going to adjust. There's no menu items to start with the word bartending. Transactions and profiles, I don't know why they didn't come up. It should be. Let's just do bar. Huh. I got to run an indexing on this. So I'll give you that piece. Here, this shows me the history of where I've been in the system. If you notice here, this is actually a new implementation that I put together for this presentation. So you notice here, I don't have a whole lot of history. So I haven't gone anywhere really within the system. So it's really kind of where we're at. Over here, if we go across a little bit further, we'll see here, this is the layout of this particular organization. You can lay it out pretty much the way you need to as far as hierarchy, as well as, roll-ups and things like that. In this case here, if I want to change companies, I can actually just go to products retail, or this is a division actually, in this case, or a branch. So in this case here, I'm looking at, products, retail versus services, east-west. And, you can change colors and things based on where you're at and those types of things. So in this case here, I can very easily change the organization that I'm in. I'm going to go back to products wholesale. Here's the time, okay? I'm going to actually change this in a minute under my profile because it's actually 11:31 a.m. here, so I'm actually in a different time zone, and I'm going to actually update that. Here we have help. The help will be context sensitive. Right now I'm sitting on a dashboard, so it'll be actually for the dashboards, okay? So I can actually see how to do things, what should be related to that, how do I do certain things like, how do I do a widget, for example, which is what the components of the dashboard are. Or down below, how do I, design the dashboard? This is actually the form reference. What does it look like? And last but not least, I actually have the Acumatica educational resources. And this actually contains all the help throughout the whole system, I think. It should show up. Come on. Apparently I've done something where it's not going to show. Let me try it one more time. There we go. So if you take a look here, this is the educational resources. So if you look here, you have everything for, dashboards, everything else. So you go down through here, form references, etc., and user, getting started, financial management. So if I click on like financial management, you'll see here are the core modules to that. And if I want to say something about accounts payable, here's the core overviews. And then if I go down through, I can actually go down to creating a vendor and then into the window itself. So you can actually do that globally. Additionally, if I go back to home on this part, you'll see if we go down a little bit further, you have implementation guides and things like that, how the GUI works, how the the DAC schema browser, which sounds like a minor detail, but how does the schema browser work, so I can see where all my data is within the system. Now, typically this isn't going to be something that people are using on a day-to-day basis, unless you're a developer, okay, or you're looking for something else. So keep in mind it's all kind of in here. So that's kind of the way that works. We go a little bit further over, you'll see here, this is the companies I have access to, and here's my profile. And my profile, remember I mentioned my time was wrong? I'm actually going to update my time to be what it is for me. So I'm going to actually start typing East. If you notice here, it narrows it down to that. I'm going to click save, and then from this point forward, we should have the correct time up there. All right. So in this window, this is where I can also set up various things. My home page, which is where I'm sitting right now. I can look at my login information. I can change my own password. I can change my own email address, assuming I'm giving rights for that. All right. If I go a little bit further, if I forget my password, how do I get there? I can actually put my password change answer in there, those types of things. I can also set up, because we can send emails and receive emails through Acumatica. And that sounds like a minor detail, except for it allows us to store our email with the activity that we're looking at. And that becomes important because if you send an email and it has, say, the invoice in it for a customer, you're the only one that has access to that. If it's stored within the system, then everybody that has access to that customer information would then have access to that particular attachment and activity for that email to see that it actually went out. So those all becoming kind of important parts. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. This window here allows you to put your email signature, just like you would say in Outlook, where you can actually put in and say, okay, here's my logo, here's my signature, those types of things, whatever you want to put in there contact information wise. And then we have other things like, if we have different people in here, they can put in different time and date formats, external identities. We can actually connect to other systems like Google, Microsoft, and things like that for identities. And we can even see what mobile devices and things the system is using for you. Okay, or allow them or not allow them. Okay, so it's relatively straightforward. I'm going to click the home page again. That'll bring me back to my base dashboard. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the menus. On the left-hand side, you'll see here I have favorites. We have things like data views and things like that. But I'm going to come down to time and expenses. Maybe I do approvals all the time. And you notice here as I highlight the menu, there's a little star here. If I click that, it still stays here on the menu, but if I go to favorites, you'll notice here that then shows up under favorites. Why is that important? Well, if I change browsers, or I change using it from a workstation to my laptop, or I'm working from home on my own, my laptop from home or my tablet, etc., what ends up happening is we want those favorites to travel with you. So in this case here, it travels with the system and not your browser or your application or your hardware. So the idea of it is it allows you to very easily make those adjustments and change that. So if I click on it there, it takes me to the menu item, but see, I can see all the approvals that I have waiting for me at this point. So the idea is you can very easily have your favorites in there. So maybe I do that. And you know what else I do? I do general ledger entries a lot, so I can actually do the same thing there. So you notice here, I have all these different favorites. If I don't want to leave it there anymore, I'm done with it, I just unstar it. And what happens is the next time I go back to this menu, you'll see it takes it down to just what I need or what I decided to have there. All right, so that's how the menus basically work. You'll see here different categories, inventory, finance, etc., as we go down through. I'm going to go into a journal transaction entry window so you get an idea how it works. So if I click on this, this is going to show me a listing of all the journal transactions that are in the system. Okay, some of them are from AR, some of them AP, inventory, etc., even some from GL somewhere in here. And one of the nice things about these windows, anytime we have this type of window where you have all these kind of pieces here, one of the nice parts about it is we can very easily filter it, just like I would say like in Excel. So if I wanted to look for just GL, I would actually just click GL here. Here's my GL entries from before, whatever they happen to be. All right. Maybe I'm only looking for ones that go to August of this year, right? So I can actually put the transaction date as 0801 2022 to 0831 2022. Okay. So it's very easy to filter it down. If I do this all the time, okay, and this is something I do over and over and over again, I can save that. And then what happens is I can say August, okay, GL 2022, and I can click OK. And you'll notice here, it now creates a tab for me. So I can go back to all, okay, see all the entries that came in. All right, but I can also then go right to here and have the short list, and I'll be there until I decide to remove it. All right, so once I have this list, I can do a bunch of things with it. I can export it to Excel. Okay, so I'm going to do that real quick. I think I got to see where it popped up. There it goes. Okay, every browser will be a little different depending upon how you use your browser and what browser you're using. So in mine, I have it configured where it theoretically automatically pops open the spreadsheet. You'll notice that, oops, didn't mean to close it. You notice here it comes in like Microsoft Way where it's got to be enabled. But beyond that, okay, I can actually take and resize the columns pretty quick, and it's an Excel spreadsheet. Dates are dates, numbers are numbers, you know, letters are letters, etc. We go down through. So it makes it very straightforward to be able to do that. So there's a lot of places where you see these places where you can actually export. You can export line items of transactions like GL entries and things like that. You can also, you know, import them back in a lot of cases. So give you kind of an idea how it integrates back and forth. I'm not going to save that. Well, maybe I will. And we'll go from there. If I want to see the entry, I just literally click on it. And in this case here, it brings up the entry itself. All right, so I'll look here. I don't know why it's displaying that way. I got a rendering issue apparently. But what ends up happening is I can very easily bring that up here and see it. Okay, so if I take a look at this, you'll see this is from this branch. I am looking at actual general ledger. We actually have statistical ledgers as well. So you can put in like head counts or square footage, you know, map locations, whatever it is. We have a whole bunch of different things people have used them for, where you can actually have different ledgers in there for reporting purposes. You can use like for financial purposes and things like that. So you can easily say, okay, how much is it per bed, per square foot, per head count, those types of things you go through. All right, so I can easily do that. One of the nice things about Acumatica, I can say, you know what, I want to actually copy this entry. We're going to actually copy this entry. So I did copy. You notice I did copy. I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to hit the paste button. And what it's going to do with that, it's actually going to create the same entry over again. All right, so it's very easy to adjust it. If I don't want to see some of these columns down below, you know, maybe I want to readjust these, and I'm pretty good with that. You know, for this is the account and the account description. This is a sub account. You know what? I don't do project contracts very often. Let me drag that over to the end. You know, cost code goes with that, so I'll put that over toward the end as well. And I don't do project very often, so I'm going to put them all to the end. Okay. I have reference numbers. Those are primarily from subledgers. So if we open up an AR entry that came up, it would be there. And these are descriptions we have. So beyond that, okay, I can actually put in notes. So if you notice here, I'm in the upper right, and I can put in whatever I want for the note. Okay. Once I put the note in, you'll see that it shows that there's a note. That can be up to 32,000 pages of text. Hopefully you don't have a note that large, but it can handle that. All right. If I go down through below, I can actually have a line item note. So I can actually have a note line by line. All right, so if I click OK there, you'll notice that there's a note there, and then this note here. So if I click on this note, you'll see it says JK test 928. If I click on this note, you'll see that it's a line item note. So basically, I can put in what I want for that. Additionally, I can actually have file attachments. Now, it's easiest to show this. I'm going to click Save there. So it has something you attach to, where I can just drag and drop it on there. But if I have like a spreadsheet, like I did a minute ago, right? So I'm going to just grab my spreadsheet. Let me grab my spreadsheet here. Okay, this should take me there. So this is my spreadsheet and saying, hey, this is what the basis is on that. I can actually just drag and drop that on there. You'll notice my file is there. So now that's attached to this. I can then click on it and it'll open up that file. So that could be any kind of spreadsheet, document, PDF, whatever my supporting documentation is that I receive something from, my accounting firm, for making an entry, those types of things. I can attach those and have those in. And that's true throughout the system. So for example, if you receive a purchase order from a customer that is a PDF, you can attach it to the sales order. So it's consistent throughout the system. Additionally, we can actually have activities against this. So if you notice here, I can say, add cost, etc. As I go down through, what do I want to do? I can add an activity. What's the activity? Well, it depends what I want it to be. I pick, here I could do a chat, I could do an email, whatever I wanted to put in here. I can just put it as a phone call, quick call. And I'm just going to put it in there. I can put in, I'm Maxwell back in the system. I'm Maxwell Baker, by the way. I'm actually Jim Koshar, but I can do that. This is required in this case because I'm running project. I don't have to be running project. If I go here, what's the task? I don't have to have a task, but I can if I want. Okay, and I'm actually going to go down through here and say this was a call, confirmation call. How about that? Right. So we can put what we want in there. I can save that, and then basically I can have these different activities in here as well. All right, and you'll see down the road that as these things happen, for example, if I email a sales order confirmation or I email a purchase order to a vendor, for example, those will all show up under activities for us to be able to see later so that we can easily know that it actually occurred and those types of things. So it's very useful that way as we go through. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. As we go a little bit further, if I do that, say this is done, okay? Well, if I don't want to, I can actually post these as a group. Okay, I can put it on hold. Hey, I don't want it to go out anywhere yet. I got to confirm some things. I can remove the hold. What it's doing here is telling me what the next normal thing is to do. But, it could be a scenario where you say, you know what, I want to edit GL details as a report. Well, if you notice, I can actually run the report from that button, okay, just like I did there, which, runs the report, gives basically an edit list. Okay, but I could also, if I do that all the time, I can actually pin that to the menu so I don't have to keep going back and forth. So if I just want to, hey, I want to run that edit list, hey, I need to send it to somebody, I can. Notice I can send it to a person in my email, and the email would actually go out from here. I could say, like so. Put my email in here and JK test because everybody knows to stay away from that. This is, I can type. I really can't type today. Part of a demonstration, right? So I can just click send and that email has gone out. All right. So it's very easy to email it there. And it kind of gives you kind of that idea of various things you can do. So that gives you those kind of pieces. All right. So at this point, my normal thing might be to release it. Hey, it's good. I don't have any approvals on it. I can set actual approvals up on this if I need to approve it, but I'm going to actually just do a release. So I click the release and it goes from balance to posted, and that's basically made gospel. So now to correct this, what we'd end up needing to do is another transaction. If I wanted to reverse it, okay, I have, reverse and reclassify. So if I needed to actually just reverse the entry, oops, I didn't mean to do that. That was just really wrong. This links back to the original entry, and I can actually just click save and release, and it's reversed it. So it's very easy to use the system. You don't have to think too hard, but you'll notice that those did actually reverse. And if I go back, you'll see the numbers flip. So pretty straightforward. If I take a look at another window, for example, the sales order transaction window we mentioned a few times, okay, you'll notice here that the window has similarities and differences. So I'm going to pick a customer in this case, and I'm just going to pick up the sales order. All right, so in this case here, this sales order is open, meaning it hasn't been fulfilled yet. But you can see here that, hey, they ordered a cabinet. It's 100 of them, actually. They ordered 100 cabinets. We don't have enough in the warehouse, okay, to fulfill this because we have actually none in this. So in this case here, this would typically be a manufacturing type thing or a distribution type thing for reorder. Depends on the particular system and what we're doing and how it's set up. All right. So in this case, you can see here the price is that, etc. So this will actually remain here and actually generate demand later on. The key to it, though, is looking at how the setup actually works. These things are actually very consistent. If you take a look across the top, the save, the plus, etc., even the copy. If I actually copy this sales order, I can do that just like I did in General Ledger and click here and click paste. Now, I may or may not want the same order to be exactly the same. All right, so it could be a scenario where once it's copied, I might want to say, you know what, this date really should be today. So I can actually just click today on that. And yep, I'm going to update the requested date. And it takes a second. I'm going to do the same thing for the requested date, and it goes down through. So you get the idea of how it's going to work. So I can create a secondary order. Now I can do blanket orders too, but this is just kind of a demonstration of how to do a sales order. So one way to do a sales order. So I can actually do it from here, click save, and my order is done. Okay, I might put a PO number. Okay, something like that, save it, and that order's there. And at this point here, it's going to generate demand. Now, I can put it back on hold and say, yeah, I don't want to create demand yet. I'm still working on the order. So I leave it on hold. So the idea of it is, until that point, you know, we can control what actually is going to show up for production and or fulfillment. All right, but the idea is all these pieces are here. Now, going back to the ease of use, you notice, remember I said before you can export these things? Yep, see, this is a line item. Again, I can really drag and drop this. Maybe I don't use some of these pieces, so I can say, you know what, I'm going to go over to the right here. If I drag across, I'll say, you know what, discounted unit price. Hey, you know what, I want that over here by this area here. I want the amount a little bit further over. Maybe I don't do discounts too often, those types of things. In this case, maybe I want the unbilled amount right there. So I can drag and drop this to how I want to work. Now, keep in mind, this is for me. So if depending how I use this part of the window or this window compared to somebody else, I can adjust these and move them around. So the idea comes back to, remember before I said, hey, you can export the Excel. In this case here, I can actually do that for the line items within the window as well. All right, so it's very consistent in the interface.